And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Great to be back in the studio, off the road. Excellent time we had at Netroots Nation. Lots of conversations of just incredible work being done. Hope for November and forward. Hope you enjoyed our time there. And if you missed any of it, make sure you grab the podcast. Now, some good stuff coming out. Biden's numbers creeping up. In fact, they've jumped up to 41% from 36% since early June because things are getting done. Even though you've got a corporate-controlled mainstream conservative media going, no, everything's bad. The sky is falling. It's all bad. Now, interestingly enough, on the generic ballot, Democrats are leading Republicans because, as I've been saying for the longest time, Republicans don't have any plans. There's nothing there. There's no there. But right now, if the elections were held today, Democrats hold a lead 44-42. Now, again, generic polls don't take into account the massive amount of gerrymandering and rigging that has gone on before the first ballot is cast. So we shall see. Some good news for folks who are the deficit hawks. Evidently, the deficit has fallen even more this year than expected. I guess this year's budget deficit will be nearly $400 billion lower than it was estimated back in March. I know some people are thrilled about that. Personally, I think we need it to invest in the future and things we need, but here we are. Because, well, it's inflation, because that's all Republicans are running on. I love the fact that you ask a Republican, well, what would you do about inflation? And it's all to the scare stuff. It's all to we're going to put borders and we're not going to hire IRS agents, we're going to hire border people because it's those border people who are jacking up inflation, not the corporate CEOs who are gouging your eyes out. No, it's not that. Don't look behind the curtain. Don't do it. Now, some are happy, some sad, some I don't know yet. But it appears that Joe Biden has finally come to an idea on what to do with the student loan debt crisis. Probably going to go the way it's looking, leaning towards canceling $10,000 in student loan debt for people who make less than $125,000. Now, I'm reading through this plan and I'm going, this is going to make absolutely nobody happy. Nobody. Conservatives are losing their mind because it's going to make inflation worse. And we're forgiving bad behavior and all that nonsense. And on the other side, you're going to have people going, well, $10,000 when people owe $100,000, not really going to make a big dent in the debt crisis. So we will see. We'll see what the president does and what they roll out. Personally, I think there's so much more to this, but this half measure, this is going to make absolutely nobody happy, and politically, everybody is going to attack it. In fact, you had the president of the NAACP just come out and go after it. Again, it's not enough. Now, the most recent poll that has asked this question, an NBC survey of, I guess, almost 5,200 adults, they came out and said 59% of Americans worry that student loan forgiveness is going to make inflation worse because, giving those people who haven't had money for a long time, money, those 44 million people in the country who collectively owe about $1.7 trillion to the federal government, that they believe is going to jack inflation up because they're going to spend that money. Those 44 million people are going to spend that money on, food and clothing and rent and car payments and stuff. You can't have that. Need those people in poverty to make things cheaper. Evidently, that's the theory on the right. Just throwing that out there. But again, this is going to make nobody happy. Half measures never seem to do what they're supposed to do. And I guess that's the frustrating part in all of this. It just is what it is. Now, again, over the weekend, I love the crazy conferences. Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, had his moment of truth summit. That's right. That's right. It was a weekend. They were going to put the machines on trial, and yeah, it was as bizarre and as crazy as you can imagine. Because you're going to put a voting machine on the witness stand. It doesn't talk to you. It can't answer questions. There's no cross-examination of the voting machine, which, again, I guess, the MyPillow guy, interesting past. But if you watched it, and this is where the interesting part of this for me comes in, because there are some things here that I find interesting. A lot of what they were spewing is stuff that was discussed 10 years ago when the machines were coming online. People were concerned about it being possibly connected to the internet, possibly concerned about foreign entities being able to hop in and change things. Now you've got Mitch McConnell, who said, look, election fraud is very rare. And 2020, nothing happened. Now, again, the Trump folks and the right, they want to believe that that was stolen. In fact, the 500 people who watched the moment of truth summit, because it was supposed to have 1 million, I think they got like 20,000. And half of those people were like me going, oh, I can't wait. Get the popcorn. I can't wait for the insanity to begin. Let the stoogery commence. And they did. There was a bunch of lunacy. There was a bunch of insanity that you just go, oh boy. Let's see how this plays out. Now, there was some things that grabbed my attention. And this is where you can take even, I like this, the phrase that, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. And out of this summit, they had a military guy. I think he was an Air Force guy, high up in somewhere, retired guy. Took a government report and talked about supply chains. Now, he was focused strictly on voting machines, where the chips and where the voting machines were made and all of this stuff. And he's not entirely wrong. And I've always been concerned about sourcing our critical infrastructure, overseas. I don't know where he's been for the last, 17 years that I've been doing this program trying to point this out. But on the supply chain issue, they're not wrong. This is one of those moments where you go, blind squirrel found a nut. Now, again, this is solely about, the Chinese are going to steal our elections. Now, the weird thing is the Chinese didn't want Joe Biden. They wanted the other guy because they got everything they wanted from Trump. The little tariffs, they didn't care about that as much. They got absolutely everything else they wanted. They knew all they had to do was talk nice to him, and he would cave because their agreement, they didn't live up to any portion of it. They gave him his press release, they gave him his moment in the sun, and they were never going to adhere to the agreement. So they wanted him, just like Putin wanted him in office. So this idea that, no, the Chinese stole the election for Joe Biden, which is a narrative change from Joe Biden learned coding in the basement during the pandemic and only took the election for himself, never mind down ballot, which, again, I had someone bring up to me the other day. They said, well, if the election wasn't stolen, then why did, other candidates, why did other Republicans, get more votes than Donald Trump got? And I go, because some Republicans aren't insane. Some of them were not going to vote for him, and either they didn't vote, or they wrote in Mickey Mouse, or they voted for Joe Biden. That's how this works. When people split their tickets, and I know not a lot of people do, but that's the answer. A lot of people don't like him. And this person that I was talking to couldn't understand that. Very bizarre. But I come back to this supply chain issue. This is a thing that out of this moment of truth summit that I go, here's the moment of truth. You now know this. Here's a place where we can work together. And if it comes out of insanity, if it comes out of craziness, if it comes out of delusion, okay, at least we're somewhere in the same ballpark on an issue that I think is really important. And that is reshoring our supply chain. If the pandemic taught us nothing, it's that we don't make enough stuff, that we're too dependent on the Chinese and the Vietnamese and well, on Asia for our manufacturing. And maybe we need to think about reshoring that. But interestingly enough, they weren't all that thrilled with that. This was clearly about, we've got to prove election fraud, so we're going to look wherever we can. We're going to dig up as much nonsense as we can. And the spaghetti theory, the 20,000 people who are watching, a couple of them are going to say something. Because I got like 10 emails from people going, are you going to watch and report on this? And I go, oh yeah, certainly. But I don't think you're going to like it because, like I said, I think half of the people who are watching were like me, watching for the hilarity. And the other half are off their flipping rockers, buying anything that the MyPillow guy was spewing. And it was, I got to tell you, right-wing organizations normally do a good job of entertaining and holding your attention. This was really dry. Oh man, was it boring. But there is that. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Lots to get to today, lots to talk about. Thrilled to be back in the studio. If you miss any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast or any of our shows from Netroots Nation. They are all there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, there's a sadistic part of me. There is a sadistic part of me that hopes that Herschel Walker is elected to the Senate. A very small part, but there's a part of me because gems like this, you just can't make up. You just can't. Herschel Walker, the Republican senatorial candidate in Georgia, was asked about, Biden's, Inflation Reduction Act. He was asked about, the climate spending, and he said they are trying. They try to fool you, make you think they're helping you out. They're not. Some of that money is going into trees. We've got enough trees. Don't we have enough trees around here? Yeah, he actually said that. Think about it. This is the guy who said if we came from apes, why are there still apes? Think about it. Now, interestingly enough, there was a study done back in 2015 that said, the planet has about 3 trillion trees, which is far less than we had at the beginning of humanity. Now, I've actually had people tell me that there are more trees now than there have ever been because someone blathered that. And you just go, hold on a second. Walk me through that thought process. How could there be more trees? I mean, did we have highways back then? Did we have, these concrete jungles of cities? Help me with this. Help me understand how you can come to this place where there were more trees when today than there ever have been. It's nonsense. Now, scientists are saying that there aren't nearly enough trees to offset climate change, especially as we're burning fossil fuels, and we do need to do some more. And we need to get off the dirty stuff, which is why I found it interesting that my former state of Ohio, and geez, guys, I used to be proud to say, I was born and raised in Ohio. I love the Buckeye State. You're getting crazy. You're getting like Florida. You're getting like you're losing your mind here. Because right now there are at least 10 counties in Ohio that have passed resolutions to ban wind and solar projects from the counties. And you go, why would you do that at a moment when the federal government is spending huge amounts of money to invest in wind and solar and to create jobs in areas? Why would you limit your ability to take advantage of doing that? Especially these are all rural counties, especially in rural counties that would benefit from it, that would help your citizens. Why would you do such a thing? Oh, that's right. Stupid. I forgot. Because understand, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to spend heavily in rural areas. The ones that would vote for the last guy. But you've got these different counties who, for some reason, and again, it comes back down to the politics of the day, saying, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to block the ability to invest in future energy production because we want to drill, baby, drill. And the weird thing is most of these counties, as I understand them, they're not drilling counties. And now understand, Ohio passed a law, Senate Bill 52, I believe it was, that gave counties the authority to be able to ban these kind of projects. Because, we want to make things hyper-local. Knowing that it's easier to go and pay off a couple of these county commissioners to push through these resolutions to make it almost impossible to transition to clean energy. This is where the right they've really figured this game out. And as we try and transition away from fossil fuels, you're going to have, I think about it like all the rallies against the vaccine. You were able to get the dim to get all lathered up and all riled up and to, defiantly expose themselves. You're going to use those same groups to ensure that we don't get off of the dirty stuff. And you don't get to invest in these places that are desperate for it. So you're going to continue in this world of nothing getting done in these counties and jobs being lost, especially as we move away from the dirty stuff, because it's going to happen. Corporate America is moving in that direction. And this investment by the Biden administration is going to make that faster. So all they're doing is, like they say, bite your nose off in spite of your face. Now, these are agricultural places. One would think, that this would be something that they would be all in favor of. But it's gotten to the point where this is just about which team you bought the hat for, which shirt you bought. Now, I look at this report coming out of China that evidently they're on the brink of a catastrophe with regard to water, much like our southwestern U.S. China's had a multi-year drought. This could push the country into absolute crisis. And it would harm their grain production. It would harm their electric production. It would harm them in ways that I don't know how they get out of it. And not only them, globally. What would it mean to global food production if China just all of a sudden, nope, there's nothing left? Industrial materials would be short. There'd be shortages of. It would be worse than what's going on with the pandemic. It'd be worse than what's going on in Ukraine. It would be bad. And yet we have these moments in this country where people are still, not just because it's one party or the other. And this is where I'm hoping that there's some Republicans out there who are going, you know what? this is bad for business. You know, not having water in the Southwest is kind of bad for business. Not having the ability to, survive in the southwestern U.S., kind of a problem. Now, I've had people say, "But Rick, we'll find technology, we'll work our way out of it." I don't know. If you look at Lake Mead, if you look at the Colorado River, you look at the water supply, it's only going to get worse. And those are fast-growing areas. What happens when that all dries up? What happens to all of those people? Well, they start to move. And where do they move? They move where the water is. And they put strain on those resources. If we don't act, and this is just one of those weird kind of moments where you go, why? Why would you if you were an elected official, why would you choose to ban energy production on any level, really, but especially the renewable stuff? Why would you do that? Other than it's just spite. And I'm sure the fossil fuel industry is funneling tons of money to them. I'm sure the right-wing think tank machine, I'm sure the machine that funnels cash into all of these groups, I'm sure they are spending like drunken sailors. But why would you allow that? Now remember, these are the people who believe in less intrusive government. At least is what they tell you. Get government out of our lives. What about the landowners who may want to put solar panels on their land? May want to put windmills on their farm? You've now just banned that. It's insane. It really is kind of crazy to think, again, this is supposed to be the party, the Republicans are supposed to be the party of freedom and less intrusive government, and yet at every turn, they're in people's lives. They deregulate corporate America, all right. They've done well there, because corporations are special people. But everybody else, be concerned. Be very concerned. And look, the climate issue just isn't here. It's global. The water supply issue, it's just not here. It's global. The food supply issue, not just here. It's global. Now, granted, we're going to be one of the last ones that suffer from it, but we will suffer from it. And this is one of those moments where we as a country better have a collective wake up. We better have a moment where we go, oh, I get it now. It's about our survival. It's not about which team you're voting for. It's not which color hat you wear. It's about, oh yeah, you need water to survive. Oh yeah, you need crops to be able to eat. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Wouldn't it be nice if we thought like that again? Wouldn't it be nice if we had a corporate-controlled, for-profit media that said, hey, maybe think a little bit instead of pushing the division? Just my thoughts. I got lots to get to. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Sari Beth Rosenberg is going to be here to share some thoughts on book bannings, making them great again.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1981. That was the day 13,000 workers in the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, or PATCO, went out on strike. Highly stressed workers had been driven to nervous exhaustion by long hours, problematic technology, and brutal management. They wanted better pay and working conditions and a 32-hour work week. PATCO workers had proven that militancy bred victories throughout the 1970s. But public sector employers went on the offensive as the decade drew to a close. By the time Ronald Reagan was elected to office, automation, deregulation, and inflation had taken its toll. As Joseph McCartan details in his book Collision Course, controllers found new technology unreliable. They experienced, on average, a computer outage a day in critical moments of takeoffs and landings. As well, the Airline Deregulation Act and the Civil Service Reform Act became law in October 1978, serving to restrict union rights and worsen working conditions. By the late 1970s, inflation had tripled. Federal workers, unlike those in the private sector, lacked any COLA protections. Emboldened by their skill level, solidarity, and previous victories, the controllers walked. Invoking Taft-Hartley, President Reagan issued a 48-hour back-to-work ultimatum. In a historic move, he fired the strikers, jailed their leaders, and forced costly injunctions that spelled doom for the union and the labor movement. Many labor activists had hoped the Teamsters and machinists would walk out in support. Instead, the strike was a pivotal moment for labor. It ushered in an era of unprecedented attacks not seen since the 1930s. As Robert Weir notes, Patco's defeat touched off a new wave of downsizing, decertification, and concession strikes. The labor movement continues to suffer its impact today.
Let's all gather round the campfire, buckaroos, and let old Cactus Jim here tell you about some of today's hardy, hard-working cowboys. Yes, those manly men who live free-spirited, yippee-ki-yi-yo cowboy lives out in the rustic ranch country of the Rocky Mountain West. Oh, wait, that was a century ago. The cowboys who are now humming Home on the Range across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming are multimillionaire and billionaire corporate titans and celebrities like Rupert Murdoch, Bill Gates, and Bruce Willis. They don't really live there nor mix with the locals, nor do they actually ranch their spectacular 300,000-acre spreads since they don't know how. So they hire real ranching outfits to bring in some cattle, sheep, and other ranching accoutrements. Then they fly in on private jets occasionally and strut around like John Wayne. They are, in a word, pathetic. But they surely are land barons, spending up to $200 million each for their vast spreads. Indeed, these dilettantes rule the availability of ranch land and scenic wilderness, pricing out people who really want to ranch and locking out families who want to experience some of nature's most majestic rivers and mountains. 15 years ago, the biggest private landowners held 27 million acres. Now they've grabbed 42 million acres for themselves. Well, say apologists for wealth concentration, they bought the land with their money, so it's fair and square. But hold on, Slick. They don't come here just for the views, hunting, and exclusivity. Their ranches get generous land subsidies. Plus, states like Wyoming provide no-tax hideaways for their wealth. This is Jim Hightower saying, so even though you and I are shut out of these gated land baronies, at least we can take pride in knowing that it's our tax dollars that help the rich buy them and lock the gates. There, doesn't that make you feel better?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Texas. Yes, Texas. you go, which state's the craziest? Is it Texas? Is it Florida? Is it Alabama? Is it going to be Pennsylvania? Is it Tennessee? Could be any of them right now. Although, you know, when we were in Netroots Nation in Pittsburgh, there were some folks out there who most certainly want Pennsylvania to be just like Florida and Texas. Crazy. And the reason I bring up Texas, book banning, we're making book banning great again. We've talked about this a number of times, but the most recent one that's popped into my radar, this George Dawson Middle School in Texas, named after George Dawson, a 103-year-old guy who, you know, co-authored a book about learning to read at the age of 98, which is really impressive. You know, kind of an interesting thing. They've attempted to ban his book. Now, it's not banned yet, so let's not get crazy. It's not banned yet. It's under review. Which means it's basically banned. I'm here to share some thoughts on just how ironic and ridiculous and insane this is. I've asked our good friend Sarah Beth Rosenberg to come talk with us. Sarah Beth is an educator. She's also a senior advisor to the Voters of Tomorrow, co-founder of Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence, one of my favorite educators. Sarah Beth, thanks for taking time for us.
It's so great to be here with one of my favorite radio show hosts.
So let's talk about this George Dawson Middle School. Most people don't know who George Dawson is. I didn't until now. But if you went to the school, you kind of had to know who he was. And now, I guess, taking the book off the shelves of this guy who was, the grandson of a slave, wrote a book about his life, yanked off the shelves.
Yeah, I had not heard of him. I'm really excited to learn about him. I'm not excited about why I just learned about him. It's as if these school districts are competing to make the headlines for the most egregious decisions. And it looks like Dawson Middle School, which I believe is in Southlake, Texas. You can fact check me on that. Which great podcast about Southlake. They've been in the headlines before about getting in the middle of these culture wars. Well, they're back at it again. And now I want to read that book. And I bet you all the kids who go to the George Dawson Middle School who hadn't thought to read the book sure want to read it now, since it's under inspection or investigation. Is that what they're calling it these days?
Under review.
Under review, right.
A seventh grade journalism class teacher wanted to use the book for the class, and somehow they're not saying how. Was it a parent? Was it some outside group? They're not saying who, but it's under review because, well, they don't think there are parts of it that are suitable. And I would love to know which parts they don't find suitable.
Right. I would love to know as well. And I bet you the book's already sold out on Amazon, right? That's what they're doing, right? It's absurd. I mean, honestly, when I first saw this today, I thought someone was punking me. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to retweet this. This is another one, because there was a banned book list that actually was not actually inaccurate. It was misinformation. So I thought this was more misinformation on book bans, but sure enough, it's under review. It's the new term, right? Yeah. No longer are we calling them book bans. We're calling it under review because that somehow sounds better. Yeah. I don't think so.
No, it's crazy. I think about all the books that I read in high school. Catcher in the Rye, Kill a Mockingbird, Ulysses. I mean, there's a bunch of them that are all now being banned. I mean, basically my entire education is being banned. And it's one of those things where you go, I don't know if that's a great idea, and I'm not thrilled about it. Now, were there things in those books that made you think and made you discuss things? Yes. That's what education's about.
Right, and it's as if they think that kids go to school and that's where they exist, and they only get their entertainment from public libraries and public school. Have they reviewed what kids are watching even on Netflix or scrolling through on their phones? It's absurd.
Yeah, but again, I look at the fact that, while I was at Netroots Nation in Pittsburgh over the weekend, you had Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, come in to do a big rally for our Nazi, Doug Mastriano. Yeah. And one of the comments was, from the people that were in the crowd is, we want Pennsylvania to be just like Florida. I'm like, no, that's not great.
No.
Educationally, not great. Even though, look, we're at the very bottom funding-wise, and Mastriano wants to make it much, much worse. We're still not Florida.
Right. Or Texas. It feels like Florida and Texas are battling it out right now, but there are other states that are jumping, putting their hats in the ring as well. It's terrifying. As everyone who knows me and is listening, and as you know, Rick, I teach in New York City, and my heart goes out to teachers in these states, in these districts, who did not sign up to be this center point of the culture wars. They just want to teach kids and educate them, and this becomes a youth rights issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we emphasize this, because when they're attacking teachers, when they're attacking what books kids can and cannot read or put them under review, what they're really doing is they're attacking young people and their right to learn. So my student will now maybe get to read this book about George Dawson, but they're going to be sitting next to a kid in Texas, let's say, who didn't get the same equal education when they end up in the same college classroom, let's say, and
Yeah.
it's a rights issue.
Now, the interesting thing for me, Sari, and you're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Sari Beth Rosenberg, Senior Education Advisors for Voters of Tomorrow, co-founder of Teachers Unify to End Gun Violence. When I was looking at this statement on DeSantis, he was going to go back home and, because he went on a barnstorming tour around the country, Ohio, Pennsylvania, to stump for crazy candidates. They said he was going to run back home and he was going to push for a slate of 30 different school board officials, and there right now seems to be this huge push to get lunatics on the school boards so that they can ban more books, so they can do more of these things and keep kids narrowly minded. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts are that we need to double down and put our own candidates, encourage people. And I don't even consider this an issue of politics anymore. It's democracy versus, I'm going to say it, fascism. Do we want people on our school boards who want young people to have a well-rounded education where they're challenged to think critically and where we respect kids enough to trust that they understand and can handle these hard truths, read about these difficult concepts? And the only way we're going to ensure that every kid in this country gets an equal education is if we get people to run for school boards, because they're hell-bent on getting their people on there. And I feel like I sound like I'm being histrionic, but like it's terrifying. And that's just it, plain and simple.
Now, I've had parents reach out to me, Sari Beth, who they're angry about all this hyper attention put on the LGBTQ community. They're on the theory about race that's critical. They're worked up. They're lathered up about this because they've been told to fear the boogeyman, that they're going to turn your children gay, and they're going to all be apologists and all this. Thoughts on that?
I avoid watching Fox News for all the obvious reasons, because it's, especially in the evening hours, it's not news. But I had I wouldn't say pleasure, of watching a compilation that Media Matters put together today. And it starts off with the Fox News personalities reading the headlines about teacher shortages. And then they jump cut to a mashup of 2 years of Fox News personalities saying the most hurtful, harmful, and untruthful things about what teachers are doing, that they're lazy, that they're groomers, that they're racist, teaching CRT. And what's happening is that people who are watching this are in this echo chamber of lies. And I don't even think they have, it's like what I like to say to these parents who are freaking out about what we're doing in the classroom, which we're not, is remember your teachers from school growing up. Like, go talk to a teacher. We are real normal people who really don't have, even if we wanted to, and we don't, I can't speak for every teacher, but every teacher I know, we're not there to indoctrinate. And even if we wanted to, we don't have the time or interest or bandwidth. We need to we want to get your kids thinking critically, learning in the classroom. No one has time for this. We can barely get through I can barely get through my lesson. Ask my students. I have so much I want to teach them and get them to do, and skills I want them to practice. I don't have time to get through the lesson most days, let alone quote unquote indoctrinate them, whatever the heck that means. What I need the media to do, and I love that you do this all the time, Rick Smith, is talk to teachers, humanize them, because Fox News has done a great job at demonizing us.
Yeah, you're the most hated people. You're public enemy number one right now.
Who knew? When I went into teaching, that's the last thing I thought I would become. I went from the entertainment industry to education because I wanted to help people. And if you turn on Fox News, I'm being told that I went into education because I wanted the easy job and to indoctrinate. So who knew? Right?
No, I got to tell you, being a teacher is not an easy job, and I would argue that it's probably the profession that has the most wage theft in it of any profession in the country right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I were to clock the hours that I just celebrated my 20th year of teaching. If I were to have who has time for that? To clock the hours that I spend not in the classroom, preparing, grading, even just educating myself and thinking about how I want to plan out a lesson. I mean, but I'm probably making a penny an hour. I mean, I'm not good with math, probably not, but definitely wage theft. And that's why I support, I wish that every single teacher could be in a union, but we know that there are some districts and states that don't allow it.
Now, I look at Columbus, Ohio, where right now teachers are on strike, fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, smaller classes, more say in the classroom, all of those things. And again, some of the responses that you read, very hateful, very attacking of these teachers who just want better conditions for not just for themselves, but for the students. And I forget who said it first, but it's right. The teachers' working conditions are the students' learning conditions. So why wouldn't you want them both to be good?
I don't know. I think it goes back to something that you do a great job at doing, which is educating people about labor union history so they can understand what labor unions actually are. Because just like teachers have been demonized by certain forces, so have labor unions, where I think if you were to ask just someone walking down the street what a labor union is, the history behind them, I think there's a lot of false negative perceptions around labor unions. And it's really important that we continue to educate people about labor unions and stop this whole demonization of what they are. They're really to create ideal working conditions so that whether it's a Starbucks or a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's or a classroom, the workers are getting paid a fair wage, given fair hours, and it makes the customer, the students, whoever's using that establishment happier and get a better experience.
Yeah, I mean, heaven forbid we have empowered people doing the tasks that we need. Now, I look at the Columbus situation, and every time you turn around, there are strike breakers trying to figure out how to bust unions up. This one's kind of new. I mean, coming out of the pandemic, we had everyone learning virtually. Now there's talk of having virtual strike breakers come in and break up the Columbus strike, which, again, they're learning new tactics.
I honestly am embarrassed because I never thought about that. Because Rick, you and I spoke a lot throughout COVID and the pandemic about virtual education and where's it going and what place is it going to have in society once we're out of the pandemic, which we're not yet. And I hadn't thought of this. It's quite clever of them to just bring in virtual teachers, virtual strike breakers. And listen, I get it. I heard a news item about a mother talking to her young child and hadn't broken it to them yet that they might have to do virtual school because of the strike. And she knows that, is triggering to her kid because they didn't like being in virtual school. So I understand it's a really complicated situation, but I support labor unions. I support what these teachers are doing. Yeah. So I don't love the idea of virtual strike breaking at all.
No, my fear had always been they were going to move all education to virtual. Fortunately, everyone got a taste of it during the pandemic, and it's probably not going to go that way because look at what they've done to higher education. They've put virtually everything online in these for-profit institutions, and they're diploma mills. You don't learn much, and the fear is that they end up profitizing and privatizing, K through 12 in the same kind of model where you got somebody who knows where facilitating classrooms, not actually teachers, but facilitators, and that's scary stuff. Last thing I wanted to ask you about. Again, there's the transgender sports issue seems to be hot and heavy right now, but I've been waiting for this to happen. Evidently, and they won't say what sport or who the people were, but evidently two parents were mad that their daughters lost in a competition and then filed a complaint because evidently the person who won they believed was transgender, and the school didn't notify the parents or anyone. They just went back through that student's records from kindergarten forward to ensure that they were the right gender. We're really not handling this issue well on any front, in my view.
There's a lot because I hate to say it, I'm a teacher, but there's a lack, just like how there's a lack of education around labor unions, there's a lack of education around transgender people. And what's scary is that, I'm going to loop it back to what we were talking about before, schools are, like in Florida, are making it impossible for teachers to create a climate where people can learn about transgender people. And this is only going to get worse. And I feel that's all I say lately, but it can get better. Let's end on a good note. It can get better.
How?
We fill up our school boards. If people vote in November, I know people say, oh, well, I voted and look where we're at. Well, don't sit back and not vote in November, because if you don't like it now, imagine what it's going to be like when none of us vote in November. But we need to not get defeated by these forces. And my advice to people is, if you're sitting here feeling just kind of hopeless, think about young people in your lives, your children, your friends' children. This is not the world we want to leave to them, and it's not the world that they deserve to have. So we need to fight back. We need to create an environment and the only way we can create that environment of open and acceptance is by voting people in who care about those issues, including your local elections.
There you go. Sari Beth, as always, great talking with you. I appreciate the time, and keep up the great work and being one of my favorite teachers.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for being one of my favorite radio hosts. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks so much. Our good friend, Sari Beth Rosenberg. No, seriously, I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Has it gone too far? Do you see it getting worse? Sadly, I do. Back after this. Stick around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that folk singer Malvina Reynolds was born to a Jewish family in San Francisco. Her parents were socialists and operated a tailor shop. Malvina learned the price of speaking out for what you believe in at a young age. Her parents opposed U.S. entry into World War I. Because of this, Malvina's high school would not issue her a diploma. She was able to still go to college at Berkeley, where she eventually earned her Ph.D. She married carpenter and labor organizer William Bud Reynolds. She became a prolific folk singer, playing around the Los Angeles area. During the 1960s, she wrote about songs supporting civil rights and labor rights. Her song, Free Enterprise, offers the lyrics, "The air you breathe is poison. The food you eat is worse. The dollars in your paycheck are pennies in your purse. There's nothing free about it. You pay at every turn, except the guys in Wall Street who have the stuff to burn. They had to make new brain machines to count their profits rise, but since there's always room for more, they can still make their profits soar. A little war does wonders for free enterprise." Perhaps her most well-known song is Little Boxes. The song was inspired by driving by hillside houses in Daly City, California. It talks about the conformity of middle-class suburbia.
Where they are put in boxes and they come out all the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family in boxes made of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
And a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. How about yourself?
Oh, hanging in there. What's on your mind?
Well, here's the thing. Once you start banning all these books, which is something that, and I'm just going to be blunt, the Christian religion has done for, almost 2,000 years, if you go back and check. But when you do that, you cut off knowledge, you keep people from being exposed to new ideas, and you're able to push your propaganda and your lies because nobody can read anything that tells them the truth. And, if these Republican evangelical whack jobs want to keep their own kids from learning things and reading books, that's one thing. But when they're affecting everybody else's, because remember, this is the party of don't tell me how to raise my kid or live my life or anything else, they're overstepping the line. And I have, quite frankly, I have had it, and I am fed up with them all.
I'm right there with you. I appreciate the call, Alice. Thank you.
Bye.
Great, good stuff. Look, I've had a bunch of people, on the transgender issue, but this one I'd called from the beginning that you're going to have in every one of these poor losers always now saying, well, my kid lost, so there must be cheating, and we're in a weird moment. And look, we haven't done the work to figure out how to deal with this, and the response from the right has been just plain nuts. And we haven't had a public discussion on how to deal with this. And I got to be honest, I don't know what the answer is either. But I know, and this is the thing that I get, I know having crazy religious zealots and right-wing ideologues making decisions in the most hateful way, not the way we should be going. I go back to this life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing. When do we start banning other things? Once you start down this path, it gets really ugly really quickly. I mean, I just had a conversation over the weekend on the transgender issue because a friend who a year ago transitioned, and when we spoke originally, when he came to me and said, "Hey, this is where I'm going," I told him, "Look, I wish you the best, and I don't understand it. Never going to understand it. Love you. Hope this makes you happy." Saw her over the weekend and said, "Still, same position. Don't get it. Not my place to get it. I wish you the best. I hope you're happy. I hope this is everything that you wanted it to be." And she said it was. Thrilled. Never happier. And that, for me, is enough. Will I ever understand it? No, I'm never going to understand it. And we don't have to understand it. That's the weird part of all this. You don't have to understand. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to, but you do have to be tolerant of it. You do have to want for others to be happy. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's their path. And to have the kind of hateful rhetoric and the kind of protest and this kind of childishness, because evidently this other athlete wasn't feminine enough, which I don't really know what that means. But yeah, this is sadly where we're going. Now, again, as I said, I've said a number of times, we've dealt with this issue. I dealt with this in the workplace 30 years ago. And nobody cared. It didn't matter to anyone then. Why now? Why is this such an enormous issue now? And the truth of the matter is, it's because the Republican Party isn't the party of governance. They're not a governing party. They're not an idea party. They're a fear party. They're an angry party. They're a destructive party. They don't have any ideas. They have no idea of where to take the country. You ask them about inflation, they talk about immigration and trans issues. They don't talk about how they're going to actually deal with any problems. They only talk about how they're going to create new ones. And this is one of those moments where you go, is that the country we want? Is that the direction we should be going? Is this what the fight should be? And the answer is no. You don't have to do it. You don't have to. I said the same thing when we were talking about same-sex marriage. Someone came up to me and asked me to marry them. No, thank you. But hey, I appreciate you asking. If you're against it, don't do it. It's that simple. That simple. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. That's where we will be found. Wherever you get your favorites, ours will be there. Make sure you share with your friends.
I'm glad you're okay. What was that like for you?
I thought I was dying. I thought I was going to die.
Dallas-Fort Worth, latest U.S. city hammered by record rain and floods.
The authorities have been ordering power rationing for factories and supply chains.
China rationing energy supplies due to record heat and drought. Plus, bad news and good about PFAS forever chemicals.
All of that bad news and good straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's pretty clear this planet is not doing great. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now higher than ever in human history. And a recent UN Commission climate report was called An Atlas of Human Suffering, which coincidentally is also the slogan for Craigslist.
Also, coincidentally, for your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, well, here we go again.
Yes, Dallas-Fort Worth is the latest U.S. city to get hammered by record rainfall. On Monday, some areas were hit with 15 inches, that's 3 months' worth of rain, in just hours, causing flash flooding that inundated highways and roads. At least one person is confirmed dead in the flooding, and the region has been in exceptional drought for months, underscoring that man-made climate change makes extreme weather events much more extreme.
This is insane and getting insaner in state after state after state this summer.
Yes, this is the 5th 1-in-1,000-year storm to hit the U.S. in less than a month.
Wow.
Meanwhile, a new analysis finds that an unprecedented number of U.S. households are financially exposed to flood damages. Last year, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, overhauled the National Flood Insurance Program to make premiums more accurately reflect the actual flood risk of a property as climate change and development intensify flood damage.
Oh, boy.
But E&E News reports that since that change, more than 400,000 U.S. homeowners instead simply dropped flood insurance due to the higher prices, putting an unprecedented number of U.S. households at much higher risk of financial disaster from a flood.
Great timing right before 5 1-in-1,000-year floods this summer.
And as hurricane season is getting underway.
Oh, man.
Russia is spiking global natural gas prices again. Gas prices in Europe closed at a new record high after Russia announced it will shut down a critical pipeline exporting natural gas to Europe for 3 days for maintenance, right as Europe is grappling with energy shortages and racing to store natural gas for winter. Russia has already throttled gas exports to just 20% of normal in retaliation for Europe's support of Ukraine in Russia's brutal invasion. Good news, though, in Germany, solar power hit a new record high this summer and is poised for massive growth.
Well, that is good news.
China just hit an all-time high overnight temperature of 94 degrees Fahrenheit.
Not as good news.
That is the low temperature, 94 degrees.
Oh.
It's another gobsmacking record in the unprecedented extreme heat wave with temperatures in the triple digits for more than 2 months straight. Axios reports that the persistent heat has no parallel in modern record-keeping in China and potentially in the world. The heat, combined with a severe drought, has decimated China's crops and dried up rivers, including parts of the Yangtze, cutting output from China's hydroelectric dams. That has forced officials in key industrial hubs to temporarily shut down factories like Toyota, Apple, and Intel. Officials have resorted to cloud seeding to make it rain. Chinese economist Don Wang on CNBC warned that the impacts of the persistent heat and drought that are harming China's economy are also radiating out across the rest of the world.
We already see slowdown in production in the steel industry, in chemical industry, in fertilizer industry, and those are very important things when it comes to construction, to agriculture, and also to manufacturing in general.
So for all of these years, with all of these Republicans saying, we're not going to do anything here because, oh, look, China, they're polluting as much or more than we are, all of this disaster affects everyone, including, yes, us here in the U.S. when it comes to the economy.
Yes, indeed it does. But some bad news and good news on PFAS chemicals, a class of chemicals widespread in industrial and consumer applications, nicknamed forever chemicals because they don't break down in the environment and are incredibly costly and difficult to clean up. The bad news, PFAS pollution is far more widespread than previously understood. A new study has found PFAS chemicals in rainwater samples all around the world at levels exceeding Environmental Protection Agency standards for human health. But the good news is that researchers have discovered an easier and cheaper technique to break down PFAS forever chemicals into harmless byproducts. Experts say they are cautiously optimistic, saying the study is the first degradation mechanism they have ever found that, quote, could actually make a difference.
Not so forever now, are you, PFAS? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember earlier in August, we had a couple of guests talking about what happened down in Florida as a state attorney was suspended by the governor there, Ron DeSantis, for some things that he said. You know, not even actually doing, but just things that he said on issues, the hot button issues of the day. And then suspended him and put his person in the place. And I said at the time, we should all be concerned about this. When someone is an elected official, they shouldn't be easily thrown out. They shouldn't be easily removed. They shouldn't be easily suspended. Not like this. And Republican friends, you don't want Democrats doing this to Republican attorneys, just like we don't want Democratic attorneys being replaced. And that's why I've asked Andrew Warren to come talk with us. He, on August 4th of this year, was suspended, blindsided, as the website says, by Ron DeSantis. That's why I've asked Andrew to come share some thoughts with us. Andrew Warren, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So walk me through what happens here. We've got the story that DeSantis suspended you for some things that you said. What was so egregious that a sitting governor would throw an elected official to the curb?
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with even what I did or what I said. This is really about the governor's presidential ambitions. You know, this is a flagrant abuse of his power, and he's doing it to attack my free speech, to throw out the votes of hundreds of thousands of Floridians. And it appears to be just something so he can add it to a line in his stump speech. You know, he's been off in Arizona, New Mexico, and Pennsylvania, not doing the job of governor of Florida, but instead, talking about how tough he is and, throwing out there that he suspended me as a prosecutor.
Now, my first question is does he have the authority to do that, to be able to take someone who was elected by the voters and basically throw him to the curb and replace him with a sycophant that, from what I understand, that he replaced him with? Does he have this power?
He doesn't. Now, the Florida Constitution grants very limited authority to a governor to suspend an elected official, but it's in situations usually where someone's committed a crime or where, they've had a stroke and they're physically or mentally, incompetent, incapable of doing the job. But this is about something that I said. I had spoken out on two of the governor's favorite culture war issues, abortion and transgender rights. And he didn't like what I had to say about it. And this is his retaliation against me.
Now, from what I understand, there were no cases pending. There's nothing that you did that would have given him cause. There's none of this that you had to deal with. These were your opinions that you stated, right?
That's right. And what's important to keep in mind, too, is, I'm not some fire-breathing partisan here. I've spoken out on issues that affect the criminal justice system. I've stayed in that lane as a prosecutor to talk about things that affect public safety, affect the resources of our office, and speak out on those types of public policies. And here there was talk about criminalizing abortion and a 15-week ban. There was talk about criminalizing gender-affirming healthcare. What's interesting in this situation is that the law on the abortion law, the 15-week ban, was held unconstitutional, and the gender-affirming healthcare law, one doesn't even exist in the state of Florida. So not only have no cases been in front of me, but I couldn't be expected to enforce a law, one that doesn't exist, and another law that's unconstitutional.
So this is just pure abuse of power. And something that everyone should be concerned about, because look, you were an elected official, voters put you in that position, and now you've got a governor who appears to have overreached in any power that he may have had. Let's start there. This seems like a massive overreach. This seems like a massive abuse of power.
It is. And Rick, you're exactly right. I mean, this is about so much more than my position. This is about the ability for a governor to overturn an election, to throw out people's votes. I mean, in 2020, I had 370,000 people vote for me in an election after they had seen what I'd done for 4 years, after they had seen my record, the fact that crime had come down, the innovations we'd implemented in the office. They had seen that success. They were able to determine whether they trusted my judgment, my vision, and they voted, yes, we want Andrew to stay on as state attorney for another 4 years. But what the governor's doing here is saying, your vote doesn't matter. The people's vote doesn't matter. I don't like him, so I'm going to take him out of office and put someone else in. And that is a really scary thing for our democracy. Look, we can argue about politics. We can argue about policies. We fight about the color of the sky, it seems, these days. But the one thing that we should be able to all agree on is democracy, that people's votes matter and the people get to elect their elected officials.
Sadly, that doesn't seem, Andrew, that doesn't seem to be where both parties are right now. I mean, we've got a guy running in my state of Pennsylvania who's, in Doug Mastriano, who has said that he should be able to set aside an election and the General Assembly should be able to decide. That's scary stuff because what we have right now is an ideological thought process that the ballot box doesn't matter because, well, evidently, if we don't win, the ballot box is rigged, and people have bought this. And I've brought your situation up to numerous Republican friends, and they're like, well, he should have done what he was supposed to do, without actually knowing what it is you did or didn't do, because, well, they bought that T-shirt.
That's right. I mean, look, we've seen across this country that some people tried to overthrow an election on January 6th. Governor DeSantis did it on August 4th. He just said, I don't like the outcome. I'm going to take out this guy who's from the opposite party as I am, and I'm going to put someone in from my own party. It should send chills down the spine of every American who really cherishes our democracy. Whether you agree with the policies or disagree, whether you voted for the winner or not, democracy works by having the people elect their elected officials. This isn't North Korea, this isn't Russia, this isn't Venezuela, where the dictator gets to decide who's in positions of power over the will of the people.
No, look, I don't want Democrats having the power to replace elected officials, just as I don't want Ron DeSantis and other Republicans to have this power. I think the rule of law is important. The ballot box is important. So the question that I have for you is, clearly this is going to make its way through the court system. Clearly this is going to work itself out. Where does the process take you now that you've been suspended? And I guess the other side of this is your replacement. What kind of horrible things are going on with your replacement?
Well, let me start with the second question first. My replacement is doing what the governor has asked her to do. I mean, she came in and immediately started undoing policies that had been put in place through thoughtful consideration with law enforcement and community leaders, and policies that were working. I mean, there was a policy about trying to reduce the criminalization of poverty because we end up arresting and prosecuting so many people for driving on a suspended license where their suspension is financial based. We want to help people get their license back and stay out of the system and save taxpayer dollars, not put people in jail for, because they're poor, not able to pay their bills. That's a policy that was undone, and it's unfortunate that there's someone making decisions there who was never elected and never has received one vote from the people in that county. In terms of where we go from here, we filed a lawsuit last week in federal court to challenge this because it's blatantly illegal and unconstitutional. And over the next month, we'll see that play out in federal court, and we're confident. I mean, we know the law is on our side, and democracy is at stake.
Yeah. So now here's the thing. I from people I've talked to that understand what Florida law is, they all tell me you're going to come out on the victorious side of this. But my problem is still what's the punishment for the governor? He's still got his person in place to be able to do all the terrible things that he wants this replacement to do for who knows how long this takes. There doesn't seem to be any punishment and any kind of repercussions for this kind of overreach. So I'm curious, how do we ensure that he's held accountable?
Well, I don't know if we can, other than having the order thrown out that was illegal and suspending me. But I think we have to take a step back to really, to think about the answer to that question, because we need to move away from just the knee-jerk reflective partisanship we have in this country And people need to think about what truly matters. And one of the things that matters is democracy and the rule of law. And we need to be able to say, when people see that the government is not working to make their lives better and is instead just engaged in these nonstop culture wars and divisiveness, those aren't the people we want in power. We want people in power who are going to make our lives a little bit better. That's what we should all want out of our government. And so hopefully the overreach that we're seeing is causing people to take a step back and saying, you know what, how is this helping me? How is this helping me put food on my family's table, keep my job, get health care, send my kid to a good school, have clean air and water to, drink and breathe? I mean, this is what the people should be looking for out of government, not these culture wars, not these partisan fights. And that's just what we have here.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Andrew Warren. He is the elected state attorney for Tampa, and the guy who was suspended by Ron DeSantis. If you want to check out his website, andrewwarrenfl.com, we'll get links out on social media how you can check this out and maybe get involved. Is there something that our listeners can do? Is there some ask? Is there some petition? Is there anything people can do to support what you're doing?
Of course. I mean, we want people to come stand with us, and they can come join us at that website, andrewwarrenfl.com. And you can follow us on social media at AndrewWarrenFL. But I think most important is for people to express their voice on this. Speak out. If you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter. Everybody should be outraged at the idea that an elected official can just nullify your vote and throw out the results of an election.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, Andrew, had you told me 10 years ago we'd be in the position that we're in with the kind of abuse of power that we see coming from a lot of our Republican governors and the legislatures that are pushing these horribly hateful pieces of legislation, I don't think I would have believed that we would have gone as far off the deep end as we are. Now, look, they were talking about doing all this stuff a decade or two ago. They've always wanted to go this way, but I'm telling you, I'm shocked that the people of this country have put up with as much as they put up with so far.
I'm hoping that the pendulum swings back for the sake of our country, that we have leaders who are committed to doing things that benefit the people, that people are willing to have reasonable compromise and, productive conversations rather than just screaming at each other on social media and on cable news. I worry too, but what is really scary are things like this that are clearly contrary to the fiber of our country and the fabric of our democracy, when people just sort of shrug and say, well, it's my team that's winning, so I'm not, I'm not going to pay attention to it, or I'm not going to care. They have to think about what happens when the shoe's on the other foot.
Yeah, I mean, because eventually, and I keep telling my Democratic friends that, who want to expand the court and do some other things, that eventually, it's going to go the other way. So be a little judicious in your thought process. But it seems like, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, it seems like Democrats are much more judicious in their use of power than Republicans are. When Republicans get the key to the steamroller, man, they know how to drive it.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see that on a national level, but all politics are local to a certain extent. It's hard for me to speculate on what's happening in every corner of the country, but what we're seeing in Florida right now, with a governor who's been willing to go after businesses who have spoke out against him, to go after teachers who spoke out against him, to go after a public servant who spoke out against him. This is really scary stuff. And people should be worried about what they're able to say, the freedoms that are now being taken away from them, and again, just the threat to our democracy and undermining the integrity and outcome of elections.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, when I saw the story, I'm going, this is the beginning of heading in an absolute wrong direction, which is why I hope folks will go to AndrewWarrenFL.com. Check that out. I think there's a donate button to help you with legal bills and all that, right?
There is indeed. The governor is bankrolling this fight on the taxpayer dollars, which is ironic because he's subverting the will of the people and using their money to pay for it. We're having to raise money to pay for our attorneys to challenge this illegal action.
So again, the website, AndrewWarrenFL.com. We'll get links out on social media. Andrew, I wish you the best. As this continues, I hope you'll come back and share some more with us and keep us updated on what's going on.
It'd be my pleasure. Keep doing what you're doing, Rick.
Thanks so much, Andrew. I appreciate it. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You can also email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Does it concern you, this kind of abuse of power? Does it concern you when a governor says, you know what, I know best? You know, that kind of Trumpian mentality, the only I know? 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Right back.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I find it amazing that you see someone like DeSantis abusing power the way he does. And yeah, I guess I'm hoping that a number of Republicans are waking up. And look, you know, a lot of Republicans are leaving the party. One way or another, let's start with that one. One way or another, they are. Former Alabama Republican Perry Hooper of Montgomery, Alabama. He's been arrested and charged on counts of sexual abuse in the first degree. Yay, way to go. The 67-year-old charged in connection with an incident that occurred back on the 16th of August. Well, he was listed as an inmate in the Montgomery County Detention Center as of today, being held on $15,000 bond. He faces up to 10 years in prison for his little indiscretion. You also have the ex-Tennessee Speaker of the House there, a guy named Glenn Casada, and his one-time top aide, who have been indicted on federal charges of, well, you know, they had this little political consulting group that they fronted that, they funneled a boatload of money to. So yeah, they're fun there. Also in Florida, since we're talking about Florida, which some of them have lost their mind. This Martin Hyde, a Republican running for Congress in Florida's 16th congressional district, he says that he would have killed the FBI agents who searched Trump, you know, when he searched Trump's Golden Palace, if they tried to do the same thing to him. Another Florida State House candidate, Luis Miguel, he was suspended from Twitter after advocating Floridians shoot federal agents on sight. So, yeah, more fun there. Also, an Oklahoma State House candidate, Scott Esk, he put on Facebook that the gay people, they're worthy of death, and we would be totally within our rights to stone them. Yeah, and you wonder why people are leaving the Republican Party. For instance, this Kevin Priola, Republican from Colorado, state senator, he has switched to becoming a Democrat because he's like, hey, you know, I can't embrace all the election conspiracy stuff. I can't embrace the people who are okay with political violence. I think this is bad. So good on him. And you know, the thing that gets me is the Republicans don't have a plan to help move the country forward. All it is criming. I mean, every time you turn around, someone's criming. Which is why here in my state of Pennsylvania, you're seeing more women registering to vote for Democrats than you are for Republicans, and more women registering to vote overall. In fact, women registering about 12% more than men, which is huge. I'm kind of thinking could be an interesting year here in Pennsylvania for Republicans. Now, why would women be registering in the kind of way that they are here in this state of Pennsylvania? People who probably have never voted, never concerned with it, but now, the abortion issue, I think, has a lot to do with it. You look at Tennessee, the governor there, Bill Lee, said yesterday that he's focused on implementing a total ban, no exceptions for any reason whatsoever. Not rape, not incest, not even life of the mother, nothing. And they would criminalize doctors who did anything to help, even when the patient's life is in danger. You wonder why women are going to probably want to vote? This is one of those things where you go, I don't know, maybe your health, maybe your safety, maybe your life is worth voting for, and you can see it right here in front of you. Because understand, in my state of Pennsylvania and in another number of across the country, this is the direction. They want a total ban because it's never enough. It's once they open the door, oh, well, we're going to start with this, or we're going to start with that. We want this. And it's the death of 1,000 paper cuts until eventually we want it all. You know, it's it's how I've always said Republicans and Democrats negotiate. Republicans will come and say, well, we got to cut off both your legs. And Democrats will go, well, no, how about you just take the foot? And Republicans go, okay, they'll take the foot. And then a couple of weeks later, the Republicans say, no, we need both legs. How about just up to the knee? Until eventually, down the road, they got both legs. They chopped you off right at the waist. This is where people standing up and saying no more has to happen this election cycle. And I'll tell you, I'm thrilled to see that in my state here that women are paying attention. Because the guy who's running for governor here, this Doug Mastriano, this I'm never speechless. I'm rarely ever afraid of anyone. This guy scares me. We find out now that his security team, the people who are his protectors, are evangelical extremists who have spoken openly about we need Christians elected to into office. You need to advance biblical principles. In government, we need that separation of church and state torn down. These religious militia people, these are the people that are surrounding him. Now remember, he had the Gab guy. You remember, all of the signs are there. He's telling us who he is, as Republicans across the country are. Trump was not the disease. He was just one of the symptoms of the disease that is the Republican Party. It's up to us to listen, to believe them, and to vote them out. Because once they get into power again, they're already signaling, they're already telling, which is why they're going after the Secretary of State positions, which is why they're going after, replacing attorneys, which is why they're going after school boards, which is why they're positioning themselves to be able to legitimize stealing the next election. Again, remember, when they're pointing their finger at you, they got 3 of them pointing back at them because it's what they want to do. Scary times. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that folk singer Malvina Reynolds was born to a Jewish family in San Francisco. Her parents were socialists and operated a tailor shop. Malvina learned the price of speaking out for what you believe in at a young age. Her parents opposed U.S. entry into World War I. Because of this, Malvina's high school would not issue her a diploma. She was able to still go to college at Berkeley, where she eventually earned her Ph.D. She married carpenter and labor organizer William Bud Reynolds. She became a prolific folk singer, playing around the Los Angeles area. During the 1960s, she wrote about songs supporting civil rights and labor rights. Her song, Free Enterprise, offers the lyrics, "The air you breathe is poison. The food you eat is worse. The dollars in your paycheck are pennies in your purse. There's nothing free about it. You pay at every turn, except the guys in Wall Street who have the stuff to burn. They had to make new brain machines to count their profits rise, but since there's always room for more, they can still make their profits soar. A little war does wonders for free enterprise." Perhaps her most well-known song is Little Boxes. The song was inspired by driving by hillside houses in Daly City, California. It talks about the conformity of middle-class suburbia.
They are put in boxes and they come out all the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family in boxes made of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
And a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Let's all gather round the campfire, buckaroos, and let old Cactus Jim here tell you about some of today's hardy, hard-working cowboys. Yes, those manly men who live free-spirited, yippee-ki-yi-yo cowboy lives out in the rustic ranch country of the Rocky Mountain West. Oh, wait, that was a century ago. The cowboys who are now humming Home on the Range across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming are multimillionaire and billionaire corporate titans and celebrities like Rupert Murdoch, Bill Gates, and Bruce Willis. They don't really live there nor mix with the locals, nor do they actually ranch their spectacular 300,000-acre spreads, since they don't know how. So they hire real ranching outfits to bring in some cattle, sheep, and other ranching accoutrements. Then they fly in on private jets occasionally and strut around like John Wayne. They are, in a word, pathetic. But they surely are land barons, spending up to $200 million each for their vast spreads. Indeed, these dilettantes rule the availability of ranch land and scenic wilderness, pricing out people who really want to ranch and locking out families who want to experience some of nature's most majestic rivers and mountains. 15 years ago, the biggest private landowners held 27 million acres. Now they've grabbed 42 million acres for themselves. Well, say apologists for wealth concentration, they bought the land with their money, so it's fair and square. But hold on, Slick. They don't come here just for the views, hunting, and exclusivity. Their ranches get generous land subsidies. Plus, states like Wyoming provide no-tax hideaways for their wealth. This is Jim Hightower saying, so even though you and I are shut out of these gated land baronies, at least we can take pride in knowing that it's our tax dollars that help the rich buy them and lock the gates. There. Doesn't that make you feel better?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So if you've got a cool $100,000, got $100,000 just burning a hole in your pocket, you could have a candlelit dinner with Donald Trump. That's right. You and the Don, candlelight, little wine. Evidently, he needs the money. His super PAC is hosting this candlelight vigil with the former president at one of his golf courses. They're not saying which one. I'm guessing you're going to do a couple of them. And I don't know. I doubt this is going to be a one-on-one. So I doubt you're going to be looking, lovingly across the table at the Orange Menace. But for $100,000, candlelight dinner, what could be against that? Oh, man. And here's the thing. I'll bet you they figure out a way that they don't have to pay any taxes on it, and you get a tax deduction for it. Could be an interesting way. Because the reason I bring this up is the big story now is this billionaire guy gave the his wealth, $1.6 billion, off to an ideologue who ran the Federalist Society, and neither of them paid tax on it, evidently. And you go, how is that possible? How did you figure this out? How did you finagle? How did you lobby for this? Well, here to share some thoughts on how that happened, I've asked our good friend Lisa Graves to come talk with us. Lisa is the executive director of True North Research. They are a corporate watchdog group. You can check out their website, truenorthresearch.org. Lisa, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on, Rick. It's always a joy to be on your show.
So, what do you think? Cool $100,000 to have a dinner with the former guy over some candlelight? Maybe some McDonald's, maybe some French fries.
Not in a million years. Although I do get basically every couple hours an appeal from him or his sons claiming they desperately need the money. The other day they sent one that said they needed $2 right now to save democracy while they're in the middle of destroying it. So. Yeah, I wouldn't take that deal ever. Yeah.
No hamburgers? No hamburgers?
Nothing with the dude.
All right.
But yeah, we'll see what happens next with the criminal investigations, though.
Yeah, no, that's
different dining, perhaps.
Yeah, that I want to see, and I'm looking forward to. But the reason I brought you on is I got to know about how it is that this Leonard Leo, the former head of the Federalist Society, ended up getting $1.6 billion from this billionaire, and nobody paid any tax on it. Well, we ate the tax on it. How is this possible that you could give that kind of money to a partisan hack who has said that they're going to go and support conservatives and Republicans and crazy people and not pay? How is that possible?
Well, if you look at the filing that was uncovered by the New York Times and by ProPublica, what you see is that they spent almost $1 million in legal fees to get this deal arranged, where this 90-something billionaire who lives in Chicago, who's really an extremist, he's funded a bunch of extreme operations groups, politicians, decided to hand off his company, the sale of his company, the proceeds from the sale, to Leonard Leo, put it into a trust that Leo can basically deploy to spend to back extreme candidates for AG positions, attorneys general positions, for state Supreme Courts, and of course, as you know, and we've talked about before, continue to try to pack the U.S. Supreme Court or block the unpacking of the U.S. Supreme Court. So it was done through U.S. tax law, and this is a sign of how desperately our tax laws need to be reformed to make sure that billionaires don't basically get away with this sort of thing tax-free and get to use our charity law to basically set up their buddy to deploy that tax-free money to basically pollute our elections with more dark money.
Now, as I understand, this was done because they were able to claim that they're a 501c4, as I understand this?
That's right. So that's a nonprofit classification under the IRS code that allows the entity that receives the money to not pay any taxes on it. And so it also apparently, according to the New York Times, allowed Barry Seid, who created a great personal fortune through the sale of power strips and other electrical equipment, to not pay any taxes on this distribution of this massive gift to be used and deployed by Leonard Leo.
Now, I don't think a lot of people know who Leonard Leo is. I do, because I've always been very fearful of the Federalist Society and their original intent ideology and the kind of horrible that they're going to push. But I don't think most people know who he is.
Well, he's a lawyer. He went to Cornell Law School about 30 years ago, and he immediately got involved in trying to get Clarence Thomas confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court, despite Thomas's lack of qualifications and the serious issues that were raised about his character. Leo then went to join the Federalist Society, which was created about a decade earlier, to basically create a pipeline for right-wingers, people to the far right, libertarians and far right conservatives, to try to get into positions of power in our courts and in our government. And then in that role, he became sort of one of the main fundraisers for the Federalist Society, and was tapped by Donald Trump, who basically outsourced the picking of the Supreme Court to Leonard Leo, who packed the court with anti-choice extremists, but not just people who wanted to overturn Roe, people who were aligned with him in his effort to destroy the power of we the people through the government to regulate corporations. And so a couple of years ago, there was a big piece in the Washington Post that exposed him and the enormous array of groups that he's been helping to fund and direct in this court capture plan. And it tallied that he had these groups had raised nearly $250 million. We updated that this year to nearly $600 million over the course of 6 or 7 years. And he has been the groups that he basically coordinates are the biggest funder of the Republican Attorneys General Association, the group that is the Republican AGs for the states, as they've been attacking the Affordable Care Act, environmental regulations, all sorts of just common sense, good measures to try to make our lives better. It's not the Koch Industries, which funds RAGA, Republican Attorney General Association. It's not the Chamber of Commerce. The biggest funder of the Republican Attorneys General, as Coral Davenport reported in the New York Times this summer, is Leonard Leo's operation. So you have a guy who's involved in capturing the Supreme Court, trying to capture these state AG positions, state Supreme Courts, and it turns out that Leonard Leo was also instrumental in helping to set up Josh Hawley for his political career.
Wow. And these are people that nobody really hears of, like this billionaire who just gave away $1.6 billion. And yet, when asked about this, Leonard Leo, said, well, you're George Soros. Everything seems to be about George Soros. Yet there are literally hundreds of these Barry Saids out there that we never hear of, who spend, unimaginable amounts of money getting their way and their ideology pushed through.
Yeah, I mean, we see them pop up from time to time, like the Mercers. Suddenly this hedge fund guy and his daughter, who seems, pretty off her rocker. Both of them are pretty extreme, very extreme, allies with Steve Bannon, involved in the Cambridge Analytica stuff, backing Trump despite his obvious malice and incompetence. The Mercers, are big rich billionaires. There was the couple that was in Las Vegas that had made a huge fortune in gambling worldwide that was, backing Donald Trump. One of them passed away, but the wife is still alive. You've got this guy, Barry Said, who, he's sort of notorious for the fact that there's solid reporting that he is one of the main backers of this thing called the Heartland Institute, which ran billboards that claim that people who believe in climate change are just like the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, which is, first of all, ridiculous, and second of all, offensive. But, they are big climate change deniers. And so he's backed them. He backed some really grotesque anti-Muslim films that then he denied. He said he didn't give to that group because he gave to a pass-through that secretized his money called Donors Trust. And he's someone who I uncovered a couple years ago, was involved in basically bankrolling Supreme Court briefs without the public knowing that this single guy was one of the main funders of briefs to the U.S. Supreme Court to try to change our rights, limit our freedoms, and limit our ability to regulate corporations.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing, really. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Lisa Graves. She's the executive director of True North Research. They're a corporate watchdog group. Check out their website, truenorthresearch.org. We'll get links out on social media, how you can do that. It's incredible to me that, most of us never hear about this massive amount of money that goes into our political system. Ever since Citizens United, it's just been open. It's just been, it's been open field. And we wonder why that, there's so much wealth and power at the top, dominating our politics. As you said, it was $1 million in legal fees to do this, to get this done. How much would they have had to spend had they had to pay tax on this? The return on investment is enormous for these rich people to buy politicians, to buy our laws off. And this is another example of why we need massive tax reform. And this is something that I would hope even my conservative friends would go, this is obscene. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is really obscene. When you think about how much ordinary people are paying in taxes, let's say it's 40% when you add up everything, that does go to support our roads and Social Security and, things like that. If a business were taxed at that rate, and it was actually taxed at that rate, this deal would have put another $300 to $400 million into our ability to spend that as citizens to help support the things we need in this country to help support people having access to public health care, having better public schools. So each one of these deals where these corporations are not paying their fair share can use loopholes that corporate lobbyists have lobbied for to evade paying taxes. That deprives the American people of the chance to have those companies pay their fair share. They're not paying their fair share, and they're quite happy about it. And we do need substantial reform to make sure those corporations are paying their what's owed. There were some breakthroughs in the Inflation Reduction Act to try to address some of that, but we need much bigger reform to make sure that both corporations and CEOs are paying their fair share, because they're not. And we also need to close off these sort of loopholes that have allowed so much of this excess money, this enormous wealth that they've amassed, to be then reinvested into our political system, as you said, Rick, because of Citizens United, which was an illegitimate decision by the Roberts Court to destroy decades of campaign finance laws, anti-corruption laws, to allow these C4 groups, these 501c4s, to spend enormous money to influence our elections, to basically go around the campaign laws, which say if you want to give $100,000 or $1 million to a candidate, a federal candidate, you cannot. That's wrong. It's corrupt. But if you give $1 million to a group that backs that candidate, that candidate, loves that candidate, that they're buddies with, if they're not coordinating directly, and they don't say vote for this person, they just say, their opponent is terrible, then they basically get away with it. And that's just wrong. It has destroyed our fair elections. And the result of that isn't just that we've had some people who are getting into office who really are unsuited for office, who don't have the ethics or morals to serve the public, but also it's driven this extremism, because the politicians who are backed by these billionaires, they don't have to be accountable to you or me or other people. They don't really have to pay attention to the ballot box, because they get to cut the maps to protect themselves from any accountability for doing the bidding of these super rich people and not us. I mean, that is democratic at its roots.
No, I'm right there with you. But what do you say to the people? Because I know my conservative friends are out there listening, going, but George Soros, but the left, they do it too. Do they do it too? I mean, is it equal? Does it equal out? Because George Soros has got all this money. Do we see on the left, them getting $1.6 billion tax free to be used in an unholy war chest?
Well, it's not equal, although Leonard Leo tries to spin it that it is. It's just not. In fact, George Soros, a lot of his spending has been around civil society, trying to ensure that there are basically support for public schools, for democratic norms in society, for rule of law, not really injecting into these campaigns in the way that Leonard Leo has been involved with, fundraising for the Republican Attorneys General Association, basically giving money from his secret billionaire funders to Raga, or through the pass-throughs to Raga, which then washes that money and puts it into those AG races, so that those attorneys general, whose real job is supposed to be the top law enforcement of the state, protecting the interests of the people of the state, instead, what they're doing is doing the bidding of the corporations that those AGs are supposed to be regulating, keeping an eye on. They're not, because they're getting this money washed through. So, there was in 2020, there was a story that supposedly the left had spent just as much money as the right, or had just exceeded the money that the right spent in that election. But for the 10 years or 9 years since Citizens United, before then, the Republicans outpaced the Democrats every single year on this sort of outside spending. And the fact is that the right wing has many more billionaires at their disposal to get involved in politics, because many of these people are inherently anti-regulation. It's very hard to get money to have a counter, for example, to the American Legislative Exchange Council, because the people, like the counter to the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is funded by corporations, it's hard to get money from corporations to say, hey, we want to regulate you to make sure you don't harm the American people. They're not going to get funding. And so it's just not the same. It's not a level playing field. And the Citizens United has just created this tsunami of dark money that has allowed operatives, right-wing extremists like Leonard Leo, if he doesn't believe in abortion for himself, obviously he doesn't ever need one, or his kids, that's fine. That's his belief. But for him to have the arrogance to try to impose his personal religious beliefs on other people as binding law, that is just contrary to how America, in the 21st century should be operating. Yeah. People should have a right to their own conscience, but they should not be trying to impose their personal religious beliefs on other people through the Supreme Court or other courts.
No, and the other part of this is, look, they of course they're going to be against regulation. Of course they're going to be against higher taxes. Of course they're going to be against, all of the things that working class people are in favor of, because they feel like they're in control. No one should be able to regulate or to tax them or any of that because, well, they're special.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when you look at Charles Koch, who's, been funding Leonard Leo's operations for a long time too, alongside Barry Seid, who has also been funding Koch's operations, these, billionaire alliances. The fact is that Charles Koch thinks that taxation is theft. That's his belief. He wants to kill taxation anywhere. He also opposes the minimum wage, any minimum wage. He opposes labor unions, any labor. These are extreme views that are, entertained by super rich, super elite, super, right-wing people. These are not views that reflect what the American society, the American people want. We want to have good wages. We want to have a safety net. Billionaires like Koch or Seid, they don't need that safety net. They don't need the Affordable Care Act. They've got the best money, the most money. They can do anything they want. Yeah. But people like Warren Buffett have talked about how outrageous it is that he pays less in taxes than his secretary. That's the reality in America. And these right-wing political funders, they like that reality. They're happy with that reality. They think that's just. It's unjust. It's unfair. It's not progressive. And the fact is the Constitution was amended years ago to allow us to have taxation as a basis for funding our government and funding services to the American people and the services the American people need. And so it really is, in some ways, a very a moral fight where they're basically trying to deny revenue that the public is allowed to raise from them paying their fair share of taxes, and they don't want to pay.
So last question I've got for you, how do we fix this?
Well, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to do. One of them is vote. First of all, that's the core thing that needs to happen is people need to vote and try to, push back against this extreme right-wing agenda that's being foisted on us by a minority of extremists. But second of all, there are reforms that Senator Whitehouse and others have put forward. There are reforms for transparency. There are reforms for voting. There are tremendously important pieces of legislation that Congress could pass if Joe Manchin and all the Republicans would get out of the way and let America actually have a thriving democracy versus trying to subvert it by supporting, Trump's extreme agenda to make it harder for Americans to vote and to distort the election process by installing conspiracy theorists at every level of government. So we have a lot of work to do, but I'm confident, Rick, that you and your listeners and others, that we can come together to stand up against this, wrong path that this extreme right wing and the billionaires who are backing them are trying to put us on.
There you go. Lisa, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Keep up the great work.
Hey, thanks, Rick. Always enjoyed being on your show. Appreciate everything you do, and thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Lisa Graves. She's the executive director there at True North Research. Make sure you check out the website, truenorthresearch.org. We'll get links out on social media. How you can take a look at that. Can take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, some more stories on the raid of the Golden Palace. They're saying that documents found in the 15 boxes from Trump's Golden Palace back in January were marked classified at a level suggesting that they contain some of the government's most secretive documents, some of the most sensitive documents. Also, we find out that the National Archives letter to Trump's lawyers back in May basically outlined the urgency to get those documents back. And they did nothing. In fact, what they're saying now is 300 classified documents, about 700 pages of classified material, including what they're calling special access program material. This is the kind of scary stuff that we were talking about earlier. Stuff on, the CIA, where the NSA, National Security Agency, the FBI, all with, kind of, why would you be taking this kind of stuff? We also find out that the Department of Justice issued 2 subpoenas prior to the raid of the Golden Palace. One for the documents on May 11th and another for security footage from late June, because they wanted to see the comings and goings. This is one of those scenarios where you go, why would Trump take all these documents? And the argument that they make that, well, he can declassify them. No, you can't retroactively go, I've decided I'm going to declassify. You don't get to do that. There is no secret executive order. That was a fallacy. What was he doing with it? And this is why, again, I look at these moments and I come back to my first thought originally was just vanity. All of the stories that we know about Trump, all of the stories that he's told about himself, vanity. Look what I have. Big man syndrome. Look how important I am. But now that you find out kind of a little bit of what may have been there, I'm starting to have some real questions about motive, and I'm starting to have some real questions about why. And I think, even supporters of Trump should be going, why? Why would you put yourself in this? Now, for all of the talk of, political persecution and all of that nonsense that we hear coming from the right, look what they're doing in Florida. When we just earlier in the hour talking to Andrew Warren, look at the overreach of power that they're doing. Again, I come back to, when they accuse Democrats of doing something, they do that because it's what they're doing. When they're pointing the finger at somebody else, it's because what they're doing. It's what's in their head. And this is where we've got to pay attention to the words that they use. Pay attention to the direction that they're sending us. And then ultimately demand accountability. Am I happy the fact that an ex-president's house was searched? No. But you know what? We haven't had ex-presidents who decided that such a large amount of stuff should be theirs. It's really we should all be quite concerned. Now, I have friends who say, well, nothing should be classified. Everything should be open for Freedom of Information Acts. And that's an argument, not one they're making, but it is an argument. Going to be interesting to see where this goes, because I think at some point he has to be charged. There has to be charges coming forward, because this has to come to an investigation. This has to come to a public resolution. At least that's my thought. Love to hear yours. If anything I said today got under your skin, got on your nerves, or you agreed with, I'd love to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Angry stuff to the front of the line. I do answer all emails personally. If you missed any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you'll find ours. Great to be back in the studio. Look forward to being back again tomorrow. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.